Hello and welcome. We are so glad to have you with us, whether you're joining us live or watching the replay. My name is Imran, and I am excited to be hosting this Edpuzzle Live event, one of many, where we will discuss and learn about best practices in teaching and learning. I hope you are in the best of health, and in the chat, tell us where you're from. Firstly, a bit about myself. I'm with the Edpuzzle team, and I work with teachers and schools, especially those in the Asia Pacific region, to engage their students through the power of video learning. That's right, we are in the business of educating via video. And if you've ever wanted to level up your video lessons, you can give Edpuzzle a try. So you should see a QR code and a URL on your screen. So have a go at that and see what you can do with Edpuzzle. Now, I have a guest with me today. So edtech is my guest, and he teaches mathematics and manages the basketball team at the School of Science and Technology in Singapore. He has organized tech summits and contributed to them as a Google innovator and trainer in order to collaborate with like-minded educators globally to pick up on new teaching ideas around the world. He is also actively connected with PLNs like Google for Education, National Geographic Educators, and Flip, just to name a few. I'm already out of breath reading out his portfolio. How do you find the time, Etienne? He is interested in experimenting with new edtech pedagogies and has spoken on a range of themes like differentiated instruction, borderless learning, computational thinking in mathematics, infographics, and spreadsheets. His most recent interest is gamifying learning in the classroom to optimize learners' engagement. Let's bring him on. Hi, Etienne, how are you?
Hi, I'm great, Imran. Thanks for having me today.
How has your week in school been so far?
Um, I guess if you ask any teacher in Singapore, it will be the same. It's busy. There's always something happening every time, every
Uh-huh.
day. I
Uh-huh.
think the best part about keeping things going is just finding those little pockets of time to try something new, and then thinking about, what can I do in class tomorrow? What can I do to experiment a little bit more? Just to change things up and just to keep things going.
And that's the secret about being an experienced teacher. You kind of find these little spaces of time and space for you to really consider what works and what doesn't. And for those of the beginning teachers who are there watching this, with experience, with time, it will come to you. But of course, you're not there on your own. You can always seek advice from teachers who are more experienced than you. So to our viewers who have been joining me for past webinars, you will know that traditionally I start off with a short game. So ETA, we're going to play a game called Two Truths and One Lie. And what's going to happen is going to present three statements to me, and I'm going to guess which one is the lie. So do you understand the rules of the game?
Yep, I do.
Very simple game. Okay, cool. Go ahead. Give it to me.
Okay, I hope this works. I've been thinking all week about this. Okay. Okay, statement number one.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'll try to make this simple. Statement number one, I like edtech.
Okay.
Statement number two, I like all techie gadgets.
Uh-huh.
Statement number three, I like gaming.
Okay, statement number one is you like edtech. Statement number two is you like all techie gadgets. And statement number three is you like gaming. Statement number one has to be true. I mean, just looking at your profile, looking at your experience, that cannot be a lie.
Maybe.
So I think it's a bit harder to choose from two and three because I think no matter how techie we are, it's not possible to like everything. On the other hand, I don't know whether you're a gamer. I'm not sure what a gamer should be like. And I'm not sure whether you fit the bill if there is one. I would have to go with the third statement. I don't think you're a gamer.
Oh,
What is it?
okay. Wow. Okay, it works. All right. So actually, okay. So I actually don't like techie gadgets.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually, that's the thing about me. I mean, I like edtech, and I like having fun, but I don't really like having all these gadgets like the latest smartwatch or the latest smartphone. And it's like only recently at home that I installed a Wi-Fi router because I really don't really, yeah. And it's like only recently that I got a television.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So yeah. So it's really to that extreme that I don't really invest in a lot of gadgets because they quit on you, they spy on you, and stuff like that. But I as a student, I think I have been through the whole extent of gaming. I know what it feels like to want to play something and then to have it taken away from you and then to be like sitting there thinking like, oh, when can I get my next fix again? And then eventually growing out of it and then looking back and thinking like, oh man, that was so silly, like just sweating over having a character run around on the screen.
So I got it wrong. The lie is actually the second statement.
Yeah,
Oh wait,
that's right.
The lie is the second statement.
The lie is the second statement. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Very cool. But I hear you, because I think a lot of us here, chances are the people who are joining in, you have some affinity towards edtech, and I don't think that's necessarily the case where you like edtech, therefore you like all tech. Because
right.
when we talk about edtech, my angle is pedagogy. My angle is what is it that you're trying to illuminate in the classroom. And that might not mean having the shiniest, newest device or the best tech that is out there. Not necessarily true anyway.
That's right.
So talking about gaming, we're going to talk about gamification today. We're going to talk about gamified learning. So I'm not sure whether it's a coincidence that your third statement was about that. So take it away. Let's bring us through what is gamified learning.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I hope you can see my slides over here. Right, so the first thing I would like to talk about for gaming is game design and what actually qualifies it as a game. So one of the things about games is that it's actually a metaphorical thing about life itself. You do need a sense of purpose. You do need to be working towards something. There has to be certain restrictions in place in terms of like how life is being governed. There has to be some sort of feedback system, whether, it's your friends, your family, your colleagues, people telling you that you're doing things right, people reaffirming you, and then people, telling you if something's going wrong. And it has to be a voluntary participation, which means that whether you like it or not, you have to go through this whole journey. And I think the most, one other thing about students right now is that their real life isn't as exciting as their digital life. Okay, the life that they're having online has shinier stuff, has cooler things, has little icons and emojis. So those things actually reaffirm them more than, real life. I mean, if you look at their real life, it's not really that exciting. They have parents, they have a lot of rules in place, and they have a lot of feedback system. And the reason, and I guess that's one of the reasons why, as students, they tend to gravitate towards having a digital world and a digital presence instead, because that's where things become much more engaging for them. So having said that, there actually is a whole field of study for game design called ludology. So in this situation, we actually look at what games and what qualifies as gaming, especially for video games. There is a lot of science and research put into what actually engages and optimizes your users' attention. Of course, you can always capture that and use that for the wrong reasons. But the good thing about edtech and education technology is that in our field, there are a lot of codes and ethics in place such that as a developer, you cannot go wrong or you can't get too far out of hand running a gamified learning experience. Yeah, so that so far is the definition of what gaming is, of what gamified learning is. But I'm also sure that as teachers, most of us, based on our background and experience in teaching, you have a lot of reservations about running such running such activities in your classroom. You'll be thinking about how, what if they go out of hand? What if they start screaming? What if they start ignoring me? What if they don't do their homework because they spend the whole lesson doing this? So on top of defining what gamified learning is, I think it's also important to point out what it isn't and what it perhaps should not be as well. Okay, so one of the things that most people think that they are trying to do is this thing called pointification. For lack of a better word, it's not really an official word, but I think most people have tried something similar like that in the classroom, which is, or if you have watched Harry Potter, it's like, the 20 points to Gryffindor, that sort of thing. You did something right, 50 points to you. So most people think that, yeah, we have been doing this. I've run this for a whole year with my class. Why is it that, it's not working with certain groups of people? So one of the misconceptions to point out is that pointification or a leaderboard sort of a system actually incentivizes your high achievers. So high achievers who are already motivated intrinsically to do well are not likely to actually respond so well because they are naturally going to be piling on all these points anyway. Whereas for the um, learners who require higher support, these are the people who are going to be falling down the leaderboard ranks. And in a situation like this, throughout the middle of the year, they'll be like, why bother? And usually that's when they run out of steam. And that's when they kind of like quit on themselves. And then, and then they realize that this isn't for them anymore. At the start, it's always fun and games at the start. But towards the middle and the end, that's when actually the motivation really reflects. Yes. Sorry, Imran, you were saying?
No, I just want to say I'm guilty of this. All along, I thought things like leaderboards, point systems, they are gamification because I was thinking, okay, what are the elements of game design? I thought kind of achieving that kind of achievement would motivate or engage them. So I guess there is some kind of motivation and engagement, but maybe that has a limit that doesn't work all the time. And what you said about it kind of, it doesn't work for either group, whether higher progress or higher ability or lower progress, lower ability, because for slightly different reasons. And now that I think about it, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Because if different people are approaching this leaderboard not the way that you want them to, then, it's not something that will work in the long run. And just last week, I put up a LinkedIn post where I said, okay, gamification, hey, one thing you can start is by having leaderboards. Maybe I have to go back and edit that LinkedIn post.
No, you actually don't, because you actually brought up something quite important just now, which is the words all the time. So the whole idea is that you're not supposed to be like running a leaderboard ranking every single day in the classroom.
I see.
But you can actually mix it up every day, maybe like once a week, once a month, so that, students who require higher support after they have like enough practice and enough repetitions, they come in thinking like, yeah, maybe I have a shot this time around.
I see.
So that's one thing. But I guess this is something that we're all guilty of, in the past when we really didn't have that many games to work with. Points, sweets, or things like that were things that actually keeps people going.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, what else isn't gamified learning?
Right. Okay. So another thing which is going to be quite confusing for everyone are these two terms. You might actually have seen the words game-based learning before, GBL for short, and this actually isn't really gamification per se. So game-based learning means that you already have a scenario where you're going to be learning through gameplay. So like take, for example, a scavenger hunt. So if you're running a scavenger hunt, that itself is already a game. So you don't have to like add in more elements to make it fun, because the fun is already part of the whole journey. Whereas gamification means that you are starting off with a learning objective where your process is going to be dry or technical or complex or abstract, and you have to add in features along the way so that people can actually be a bit more incentivized to progress. So the easiest examples that we talk about, the most obvious ones will be things like digital badging. See, because by doing that, I'm not really like, saying that having a leaderboard, but instead it's more like you've reached this checkpoint, good for you. Here's something, enjoy that shiny new thing along the way, and then we move on. So it's progressive. You can also make it lateral as well. Like, if you have done enough reps of this thing at this specific level, you can get, another digital badge at this level. You don't really have to progress at the same speed as the rest of the class.
So they're not playing a game. It's just that the learning that they're going through, what you're doing is you are structuring things inside that allows them to maybe attain things which you can find in games, but they're not actually playing a game.
Yes, they're not really. So other features that the developers have built in will be things like, let's say, a hot streak button, things like that. So that if I'm a high support student, I'll be looking at it like, whoa, I got 3 in a row. That makes me actually feel a little bit more incentivized to, move on and try for another question. Because otherwise, if there's 3 in a row and then there's no one around to look at it, it can be quite demoralizing for them.
Okay, very cool. What's next?
What's next? Yes. So the next thing that a lot of educators will also ask would be, what if they get addicted to that? What if they get addicted to the game? Which is possible, because in the first place, it has to be fun for them to play, right? And if it gets fun, then it becomes like a vicious cycle. It becomes too fun and they can't take their eyes off the screen. What's going to happen? Okay, so one of the things that have been controlled ethically is this idea of gacha mechanics. So gacha originated from this word gachapon, and gachapon is actually, if you remember, as kids, you have all of these things, at the void decks and the shops where you actually put in a coin, you turn the lever, and then you hear something in the machine going like kacha. So that's actually where it came from. And then a little thing comes out. And then the cool thing about that is that you don't know what you're going to get. So you open up your capsule, maybe it's an expensive toy, maybe it's something you already have, but it just keeps incentivizing you to, pop in another dollar coin and then turn that lever again. So this gacha mechanics actually is highly addictive, and the young users don't know that. So that's the dangerous thing about it. And they also work on something called a PT system. So a PT system is that, let's say you keep walking around in your game for like 5 hours and you don't kill anything, you don't score anything, and then you get really demoralized. The system will actually write a code such that something drops out of the sky for you. So that itself is called a PT system. So people who are actually gamers who are actually not motivated to progress further will get that and like, all right, I don't mind going on for another hour or two. So this idea of gacha mechanics is actually being quite strictly controlled in all countries. Japan, China, EU, they all have written in things to say that you have to specify drop rates, and the loot boxes, you have to mention what is it that you're getting, things like that. And such things are not occurring at all in your edtech games.
So basically, it's by luck.
Yes.
You don't know what you're doing. You're just blindly doing something. You get something, and so the learning point here is perhaps when teachers are designing the lessons, any kind of outcome shouldn't be because the students were lucky.
Exactly, correct. So as you can see from over here, the RNG, which stands for random number generator, which dictates when you get your stuff, is actually on the opposite end of the spectrum from skills. Because when you're relying on gacha mechanics and relying on things to fall off the sky for you, you are relying on the other end, the right side of the spectrum, where skills are not being assessed at all. So having said that, all the games that we talk about, that I'm going to introduce later, will not have any idea of a gacha mechanic. So in terms of students having fun, yes. But will they keep playing the game for the next 5 hours, just because they want to score something? The answer is no. If they are going to keep playing the game, that's because they are going to keep trying the same questions again, or they're going to try a different set of questions, because that is what is driving them.
All right, so let's look at what we can do for classroom gamified learning.
So if you actually have a look at all the games out there, there's actually a whole bunch, and all of them fall within a lot of different categories. So I will start off here with the simplest one, web games. So web games is, let's say if I'm a chemistry teacher, and let's say I want to do something on the periodic table. So what I'll do is that I'll just go to my search toolbar, and I'll just key in, elements, chemistry elements, chemical elements, and I'll just put the words web games. And you'll see that there are a lot of developers out there who have done different things, walking across a bridge, jumping up to punch something, flashcards, things like that. All these are examples of web games. So they are really easy for you to find. They are very low stakes. And if you are going to be running them once in a while, the engagement is pretty high. Okay, but of course, there are certain limits to what you'll be doing with web games. So I find that these things are good for instant recall. So let's say I just did a topic on certs with my Sec 3 class. So for certs, low stakes stuff like what's the square root of 75? What's the square root of 80? How you simplify that, so they can just use like a simple mix and match cards or some sort of like a mini golf scenario, and then they can just play the game. Do I have to worry that they don't know what is square root of 75 and then they'll be doomed for life? The answer is actually no, because as I'll be walking around the room and as I'm correcting them, I'll realize that these are things which can be very easily rectified. So once again, good for easy recall, snap recall, good for a bit of variety at perhaps the start of the topic, where you have to unload a whole bunch of terms and definitions or recognitions, that symbols, such that students have to identify straight away.
Right, so quick recall, you can look for short web games on the internet.
All right. Yes, that's right. Really easy to find. Not much feedback given, but it's good enough for a while. But moving on, we have other things called subject-based games, subject-based activities. So as a math teacher, I'll use Desmos classrooms a lot. So if you can see from my screenshot over here in this slide, this is an example of what their game will look like. So for example, this is a bunch of, this is a marble-like situation where you can actually change the variables to control the gradient of the curve. And when you run the simulation, a ball will drop down and you kind of like collect the stars. So obviously, the more accurate your variable is, the more stars you collect. So these are examples where the student actually has to go into a bit of critical thinking, and then they start to analyze, hey, I need to change the gradient. Which variable will change the gradient of my curve? And how can I actually recognize the format of the curves and things like that? So the thing about subject-based games is that they plan this with the curriculum objectives in mind. And these are places that you can actually look at because these were designed by teachers, contributed by teachers, and they have some sort of like a strict learning outcome.
So we have a quick question from a teacher in Korea. Hello.
Yeah.
Rira. So a question is, are these games free? Are these sites that you have shown so far, are they free?
Oh yes. So one thing I have to mention is that when I do stuff, I always go for the free version. No, for one thing is because if I were to spend money on it, it will be a little bit of an unfair advantage. And second thing is also more of a personal philosophy. I believe that all education and all of learning should be as free and as easily accessible to all students as possible.
That's a great philosophy to have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What else?
So yeah. Yes. So once again, for subject-based, if for a science teacher, maybe you'll be looking at the PhET simulations. I'm sure that there are a lot of these simulations that you can run that actually gives like a very specific idea, like, you know, how pressure and volume differ from each other, or, you know, how velocity and acceleration vary because you shoot something off a cannon. So all these games are actually designed and crafted with those learning goals in mind. So that's also something that you can throw in the mix as well. So moving on, so for this formative games, this is where I think most of the students keep bugging me every day. So if you can see from this creature over here, every day is the same thing. Are we playing Gym Kit? Are we playing Gym Kit? So of all the categories, formative games are the most addictive. I would say that Gym Kit, because of its like whole about us sort of like character development and the way that you can actually engage in a game-based situation. So for example, if I do run something on percentage, the students have to answer questions, and by answering questions, they get certain features like speed. So their character moves around faster. And if it's like throwing snowballs at each other, they get to like throw a few more snowballs at their friends. So this is one of the ways that, and they find it really addictive. So they're really pressed to answer as many questions correctly as possible. So what I like about this is that they have a resource bank. I don't have to create like, 50 math questions every day. I just go in the resource bank, I make the use of it. I just type in one word, percentage or surds or exponential functions, and then I get to choose which quiz suits the class the most. At the end of it, there's a data analysis. There's some feedback that says that what sort of questions the students struggle with, what sort of questions they do well with, and they look at things like the time they spend, and that actually gives me a rough idea of like, whether the class is ready to progress to the next level. Yeah. So the strengths over here is really quite addictive because of the various characters. They are far more cuter and are far more exciting than the other categories. Yeah, so that's a third category. So next, moving on, we have formative quizzes. There will be times for your students or your learning profile of students where it's not so great to have them play because you might feel that they are too excited. In this situation, I'll actually work with formative quizzes. So formative quizzes are like Edpuzzle, Quizlet, formative. All these things still offer your step-by-step progressive analysis. So when I'm looking at their data bank, when I'm looking at their progress bar, I can always walk around the room and tell them, your question 2, 6, and 7 needs to be addressed. So they'll be kind of shocked. They'll be like, how do you know that? Because I'm walking around looking at the dashboard and have no idea. But that actually helps me to target the students. And I feel that in a procedural sort of things, like where they are expected to sit down and work out certain steps in mathematics, this actually helps quite a bit because the feedback is more targeted, and I can actually go to a student who has like done like 8 questions wrong in a row, and I know specifically who he is, and I can, for the one who done 10 questions correct, I can actually leave them alone.
Right. So are you saying that a crucial or essential part of gamifying learning is that ability to be able to give personalized feedback, to know what your students are doing, how they are progressing, the ability for the students to maybe dictate the pace at which they are being engaged in their learning. Is that
Yes,
right?
exactly. Because if you come back and look at this part again, yeah, it's the part of the game design, the feedback system, okay, be it in games or be it in life, you need people to tell you how well you're doing and what you need to address and things like that. So that actually helps the student to pace themselves as they
Right.
progress to the next level. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So now that you put it that way, when I'm playing a game, I know how I'm progressing. Am I doing well? Am I scoring enough points? And therefore, if we translate that into learning, there should be some kind of way that for that feedback loop to be put into the learning process, right? The
Yes,
student cannot be just lost and just going straight and not knowing whether he or she is in the right direction at the right pace.
right.
So with
So
that feedback loop, it helps the students in the learning journey.
that's right. But it also means that the teacher also has to be walking around and monitoring a lot. So when I press a game, I don't really just, press like set it for 6 minutes and then just sit at my desk. So what happens after I press play is that I actually need to walk around the room and I will be monitoring the dashboard. So I'll know exactly who has got like, 3 mistakes in a row and who, is actually doing fine. And you actually have to go around
Yep.
and then actually offer them the support. One good thing about these gamified features is that some of these, for example, quizzes, they will offer a feature such as like a redemption question, such that if a student were to get it wrong the first couple of times, there is the option for them to revisit that question again to actually get it right. So
Right.
once the whole idea of getting things right in a less threatening environment becomes apparent, it's not surprising for some of my students to say, "Hey, can I try the quiz again?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead." Because if they're not really high on self-confidence, it's very difficult for me to move on with them. But once they feel good about themselves, 10 out of 10, 12 out of 12, I find that the rest of the lesson, they'll be able to respond a lot more positively as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Then the last part, if those ready-made things out there are really not your thing and you really wish to build your own games, there are a few things out there. So word wall is kind of fun. I actually like the whack-a-mole games. So you can actually like put in your whack-a-mole, put in your whole bunch of like correct answers and incorrect answers, and then students will have to respond using a whack-a-mole sort of thing to tell which one is right, which one is wrong. Word wall also offers like what do you call it, Pac-Man? Yeah, a Pac-Man sort of thing where you actually have to avoid the monsters and actually gobble up your board, your points, and still at the same time make it to your correct answer as well. So these are ways that you can actually design your own games. The templates are there. Just input your questions and go ahead and do it. Other ways of building your own games, you can use Breakout EDU. They have digital games as well as a physical game kit. Classcraft is this screen grab that you see over here. You can actually build your own characters, build your own journey as you proceed along. But if you feel that all these things have too many bells and whistles, actually a simple Google Slides will help as well. Because something like, plan your own adventure. Those books you used to read as a kid, and then you say like, you're going to jump off a cliff or fight the dragon. Which one will you choose? If you're going to fight the dragon, turn to page 60. If you jump off the cliff, turn to page 50, that sort of thing. So that actually can be done in Google Slides as well. And that actually is a simple example of how you build your own games.
Right. So I've done this with 13-year-old students before. And what I got them to do was that instead of giving them the choose your own adventure story in a slide deck, what they needed to do was to create one. Because it was part of an ICT lesson, they were learning how to create slide decks. And so they put their skills to use. They learn how to hyperlink, they learn how to customize images and so on. And so, it added a bit of a fun element because, not only are they learning, okay, this is how you save an image in a slide deck, but, they are just putting everything together. And then after that, they send it to their classmates and they can have a bit of fun.
Yeah. I've been, so I've tried that before. So yeah, so choose your own adventure is actually a really interesting way to capitalize on the slides and actually making use of the slides to actually get things to be fun. So if the further concept, if you're going to search this up on your own on the site, the concept you're using over here is inserting a section break, where you insert a break and then that will actually help you to funnel and move on to the to the next slide, whichever one you choose. Yeah, right. So having covered at this point of time, we have looked at 5 different categories of games. So we have web games, we have formative games, we have formative quizzes, we have specific targeted subject games, and you also have your build your own sort of games. So right now you have a whole mix of things to choose from. So the next natural question to ask is, how is it going to look like in a classroom? So let's say, for example, I want to do something on certs. So in our local curriculum, I'm given 5 hours to do things. So how I will implement gamified learning is that I'll be using a whole variety of things based on the learning profile and the subject requirements. Certs itself is something relatively new because they do not recognize like the square root sign, what's square root of 90 and things like that. And that requires some form of linking to lower sec topics. So because of that, I'll start them off easy. I'll start them off with web games where they will just use some sort of like a flashcard mode or mini golf mode or, crossing the bridge mode to just play a few levels. At the same time, they'll probably be asking things like, how am I going to use this in real life? Things like that. So this is when I'll start off with just a simple A4 piece of paper. So the fun fact over here is that our A4 piece of paper has a length and breadth following the ratio of square root 2 is to 1.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so that when you fold it halfway, so that it
Mhm.
becomes A5, it still remains square root 2 is to 1. You fold it half again, A6, square root 2 is to 1, square root 2 is to 1. So this is where certs actually works in real life. You always maintain the same ratio so that whatever image you have doesn't go wonky every time you halve it. Yeah, so that's how I'll start them off. And then they'll be playing a web game for the first lesson, for the first hour maybe. And then for the second one, because I do want them to actually get better and actually focus more on the process, this is where I'll probably introduce like a formative the edtech quiz as a tool. And that's when I'll be monitoring and then I'll be watching, who needs help when it comes to simplifying. Are they, using the wrong process? Or are they, carrying too much baggage when they're working with their stuff? And that's how the second lesson is going to be, to make sure that there's some form of fluency before I move on. And then for the next third hour, I'll probably introduce like a formative game. So in this case, if I were to choose something like Blooket, so now they have enough skills and enough background knowledge to actually, play in a more gamified environment with each other. So I'll probably run a game like this for 6 to 7 minutes, just to get the class hyped up and, a bit more engaged before I start the day. And then maybe for the fourth hour, I'll do quizzes again because I'll fall back to a more structured analytical format where I just want to make sure that having learned everything, can they now progress to a quiz, a slightly harder quiz at a higher level? Are they able to work with more variables, with more terms, more simplification? And are they still able to maintain a decent amount of accuracy? And then for the last 1 hour, I'll probably use GymKit just to use as a grand finale for them to kind of like work in an environment where they like throw snowballs or they tag each other or they run from each other in a sort of like a gamified environment. And all these games I do not play for the entire hour. So all these games I will just run them for like maybe the first 6 to 10 minutes in an hour long class. And for the remaining time, they are actually working on their practice questions or whatever I set for them. So I'll still be going around to correct their work. And so it's not like a case of, they're clicking away and playing games nonstop because, I guess parents and teachers will really flip at a situation like that.
Okay. What was there? How did they respond to this kind of structure in the lesson where usually they start off with a simple game for different purposes, for example, to learn something for the first time or to master a certain concept? How did they respond to all of that?
So over the past few years, there are different sort of levels and profiles of students. So what I will realize over the years is that at lower secondary, of course, they are more excited for such games to happen. At upper secondary, maybe not so much. But one thing to watch out for is also how well they have been functioning as students. If they are like naturally competitive, or if they are like intrinsically motivated, I realize that actually I don't have to run such games at all. And I'll realize that perhaps I'll be better off doing something at a higher level, or bringing in concepts from JC or university, or from an Olympiad question for them to actually challenge themselves. And another observation is that lower sex students and students who require more support, they actually prefer to work in a team. So that's when I'll probably choose like, quizzes in a team mode, or I'll select a game where actually students are already randomly grouped in a group of 3 or 5, and then they pit themselves against another group, because working in a group gives them the sort of assurance and ability to discuss with each other. Whereas strong and a stronger class will probably want to work on it independently, and they'll be like, nope, whatever is right or whatever goes wrong is down to me and my own personal competence, and I'm not going to let anybody else affect it. So yeah, different sorts of responses over the years based on their profiles, on their age, and gender, things like that.
So I think one lesson that teachers can learn here is you have to be flexible. You might have prepared something, but knowing your students, you might have to tweak, you might have to adjust depending on the audience that you're trying to cater for. Then that flexibility is important for you to be a great educator. Now we're gonna open up the field for questions, and so people who are watching this, just type in your question in the chat. In the meantime, I'm gonna say hi. So we have viewers from Korea, Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, Thailand, and yeah, all over. So welcome. Thanks for joining us. And if you have a question, please type your question into the chat. Now, while waiting for a question, maybe I have one question for Itia here. So we've heard from you what is game-based learning, what is not game-based learning. Oh, sorry, what is gamifying learning and what isn't gamifying learning. So what if a teacher wanted to do something for their lesson tomorrow or next week? What is the first thing that they can start so that they can have some kind of gamification in their lesson?
Right. So what I'll do actually, so the thing that I'll actually rely on is actually the resource bank. So the idea is that actually most of these quizzes and games already have platforms where they actually support contributions from teachers all around the world. Chances are, if you're going to be teaching something tomorrow, someone out there in another part of the world has been doing it for the past 50 years. And they already have questions similar or of comparable difficulty to whatever you're doing. So instead of like just doing your own things, why not just go inside any quizzes? I would say quizzes or Quizlet, use their toolbar or use their search library and just key in that one word that you're doing for tomorrow. So if you're doing something on like, pressure and volume, just go and use a toolbar and type in pressure. You'll come up with all the hits that you need, select the one that you need, and just, edit it where necessary and just run it with your class once you assign them the game code. So that itself, I would say, is the easiest starting point for working with, for if you were to start off on this adventure.
So in summary, we stand on the shoulders of the giants that come before us. So a lot of people, a lot of great educators have done the work, and it is up for us to look for those resources and build upon what they have done. Now, we've heard about what gamification is, what it shouldn't be, and you've also seen how Edpuzzle can be one of the platforms that you can explore to provide for self-paced learning, personalized feedback, and so on. And if you recall, this is quite crucial to the gamification of learning. It's one of the important elements of game design. So if you want to try out Edpuzzle, you see the QR code on the screen. You can scan it, you can key in the URL as well, and you can give it a go if you have not done so. So Itie, thank you for your time. I hope our attendees have learned as much as I have, and that everyone here, we use our diverse perspectives and expertise on our journeys of continued growth and learning. So thank you everyone for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us if you're watching this replay, and we've been Itie and Imran. You have been great. Till next time, see you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.